You're ready. I'm ready. Yeah. Okie dokie yo. Is that true? Yes. Okie dokie yo. Is that true? Yes. Okie dokie yo. 정말로. Yes. Okie dokie yo. Say la 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 la.
Okay. Am I obsessed with A Room with a View? No, not even close. But I did go and see every single piece of media there is surrounding the idea, the lore, the concept, and the truth of A Room with a View. I'm going to walk you through this process the same way I experienced it, which is 1986 film, 1908 novel, 2007 TV movie. Want to place your bets on which one's the worst and which one's the best? Take my hand. We're going on an adventure. The film opens with us learning about Lucy Honeychurch, our protagonist. She is traveling through Italy with her cousin, Charlotte Bartlett. She is old and spinsterly, while Lucy is young and she wants to experience things and she wants to go out on her own, but she can't because she's a woman and she can't do things by herself, unchaperoned. And we find out that Lucy's mom has paid for Charlotte's ticket there. So Charlotte is doing everything she can to make sure this trip is perfect for Lucy, but it's like also not. You know what I mean? Like she's being too nice and too selfless, where she's just like, oh, you need to take the better seat because I'm not even paying to be here. And it's like just obnoxious to the point where it's like you have to give it to her because she's like, I could never. I'm so poor and lowly. I could never impose myself upon you. That's Charlotte in a nutshell. We find out that they're staying at an inn in Florence that is only inhabited by fellow Englishmen. So, let's learn about the English, shall we? We have the Allen sisters, who are just an old pair of ladies, and they're gossipers. We have Mr. Beebe, who is the vicar of Lucy's hometown that recently obtained the parsonage there. We have Miss Lavish, who is Old Deuteronomy. We have the Emersons. We have the father, Mr. Emerson, traveling with his son, George Emerson. And they're like the poorest people there. They don't have good societal standing or ranking or whatever. And they're very eccentric. And people are like, George spoke? He never speaks. Personally, I don't know if it's a matter of him speaking or not speaking. I think he's the Riddler.
Galuzzo, San Gimignano, Monteregione. Whatever does it mean?
At dinner at the inn, Charlotte is complaining to Lucy that they were promised rooms that had views. And so she's like, I'm going to tell the people who run this place and we're going to get better rooms. And then Mr. Emerson overhears this conversation and he's not part of their conversation. He's not at their section of the table. And he's just like, we got rooms. Me and my boy, we got rooms. And Charlotte's like, oh my gosh, did he just deign to speak to me? And they leave the dinner and Charlotte is just like, Lucy, can you believe that man spoke to me? And Lucy's like, I think he was being nice. And she's like, how could he be nice? That was an insult to me that he would even offer to swap rooms with me. And then they consult Mr. Beebe, and Mr. Beebe is like, they're legit, probably just nice. You can swap rooms if you want. They end up swapping rooms. It's a whole thing. Could it be that they have a room with a view now? Lucy wanders around Florence unchaperoned, and she meanders into a church and sees that an English vicar is giving a tour to some English people. That vicar's name is Mr. Eager, which doesn't come up, it'll come up later. Mr. Emerson and George are also in this church, and Mr. Emerson sees her and just starts like walking up to her. Epitome of peanut gallery is like giving these loud comments, trying to be funny, but they're not funny. They're not clever or anything. And so the vicar like looks over and is like, this church is too small for two parties, and they evacuate. And Mr. Emerson's like, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean that. Lucy and Mr. Emerson, they start talking, and Mr. Emerson and Lucy are looking at George, who's just like doing kind of odd stuff in the church. And Lucy's like, interesting. And Mr. Emerson's like, He's got a thing. Mr. Emerson tells Lucy that to George, the universe doesn't fit. They make it look like George is, like, on the spectrum.
Beauty!
Question? And then he's like, I don't expect you to fall in love with him, but I'd like you to understand him, which is like kind of an out there comment. She and George haven't exactly had any interactions, really. Later on, Lucy is walking around Florence alone again, and drama! She witnesses murder!
Oh my god. Oh my god.
She gets front row tickets to a stabbing. It happens right in front of her. And what does she do? She faints. And who should be there to catch her? Well, George! She doesn't want people to gossip about them, and she doesn't want people to know about what happened because she's embarrassed that she fainted when someone got stabbed in front of her. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but basically she just doesn't want anyone to know.
They're gonna know.
And so she's like, George, can you not tell anyone? And he's like, I won't, don't worry. And she's like, okay, I feel uncomfortable. I feel like you might. A group of the English tourists goes out to the countryside. The group is the two Vickers, Mr. Beebe and Mr. Eager. We got the Emersons, we've got Miss Lavish, and we got Charlotte and Lucy. The group splits off. The Vickers are together, the Emersons are together, and Lucy is tagging along with Miss Lavish and Charlotte until they realize she isn't very fun to gossip around because they're, like, making fun of people. And Lucy's like, no, they wouldn't do that. And they're like, can you go away? Go, like, hang out with the priests or something. So they send her away to look for the priests. She asks a carriage driver for directions, but they don't speak the same language, and misunderstandings abound. He leads her to George. She, like, comes out of the thicket. The thicket? She comes into view of George, just alone in the field. And she's like, this isn't who I was looking for. And George turns around and sees her. Without a word, this man just goes up to her and kisses her. And Charlotte was apparently following her because she immediately intervenes and is like, Lucy! Lucy and Charlotte return to the inn, and Lucy's like, what on earth happened back there? You have to find out how to swear him to secrecy. And Lucy's like, I don't think he's gonna tell anyone. Like, he didn't blab about my fainting. He seems like he's okay. And Lucy's like, nuh-uh, you are one of his exploits. I've seen this happen before. And Lucy's like, And Charlotte's like, we're leaving now. We're leaving. We can't stay here anymore because they're here. We're going now. Before they go, Charlotte swears Lucy to secrecy that they will never talk about what happened. And she paints it as if she's doing Lucy a favor by not talking about it. But in reality, she's doing it for her own sake because she knows if Lucy's mom hears about this, it's going to be blamed on Charlotte because she's the chaperone. Shellfish much? Suddenly, England. We meet Lucy's mom and her brother Freddie, who is Lestrade.
I don't see what to go peeping like that.
Can you whisper?
Not really!
And we also meet Cecil Vyse. Who in the world is this bespectacled man?
I have no profession. My attitude, quite an indefensible one, is that so long as I'm no trouble to anyone, I have the right to do as I like. It is, I dare say, an example of my decadence.
He just proposed to Lucy, and she said yes. Why? We find out that Freddie and Mrs. Honeychurch do not like Cecil, and surprise, Cecil, like, hates them. He's a great guy. You should totally marry that guy. Really proud of you, Lucy. You found a real keeper. But Mrs. Honeychurch is okay with Lucy marrying him because he's well-bred and well-connected, so it's gotta be good, right? Lucy and Cecil have a lot of differences. Like, Cecil is constantly putting her down. They have this little spat involving an apartment that needs some tenants. Lucy is like, oh, I know the Allen sisters, they're homeless, they need somewhere to live, they can live in this apartment and be our neighbors. And she, like, it's pretty far into the process, like, Mr. Beebe is involved in everything. And then like suddenly out of nowhere, Cecil just cuts in and is like, oh, I found tenants today. They're moving in today. He just made it up on his own. He didn't consult her, totally ignored everything she went through for all of this, and is disregarding the fact that the Allen sisters probably won't like her anymore. You found a keeper. He says he's sorry and that he just couldn't lose to Lucy and be one-upped by her. Like, he was just like, oh, I'm so sorry. I just can't do that. And Lucy forgives him. Forgiveness kind of dissipates after she realizes the new tenants are the Emersons! The Riddler's in town, everybody! Also, Cousin Trout's in town. Nobody likes her.
Even my poor services are better than nothing.
Freddie and George get along right away. Lucy and George reunite and nothing happens. Like, nothing is said about Italy at all. So it seems like it's fine. There's not a big deal. Things take a turn, though, when Cecil starts reading out loud from a book. And he thinks it's really funny. No one's really interested or paying attention to him because he's a bore and he's just really dull.
And so, locked in mortal combat, they brought to life the eternal...
Oh my God.
But Lucy and George are sitting with Cecil while he's reading his book, and he's like, oh, let me read you this really funny part. And as he's reading it, then Lucy and George are like, wait a minute, who wrote this book? They find out, old Deuteronomy wrote this book.
You are the Jellicle choice.
But then they're like, oh, great, keep reading. And he's like, oh, yes. And he reads from the book. And, is it just me? Or does this part in the book just really sound familiar? Like maybe a secret kiss that happened in Florence? Wouldn't know. Lucy recognizes that is their incident in print. And she runs off. She's gone. She flies. But George chases her, and he catches her, and he kisses her.
Oh my God.
Lucy goes to Charlotte and is like, yo, you told Miss Lavish about what happened. And she's like, oh, I feel so bad. I didn't know it was gonna come out in the book. And Lucy's like, take some ownership, please. And then she's like, well, we gotta tell George to leave because it's unacceptable. I'm engagged and he's kissing me. It's not okay. This is bad. And so they corner George and they get an audience with him alone. And Lucy's like, George, you must leave. I'm engaged. And this is when George makes his confession. And oh my gosh. Guys, George.
You're being ridiculous.
Oh, I would have held back if your Cecil had been a different person. But he's the sort who can't know anyone intimately, least of all a woman. He doesn't know what a woman is. He wants you for a possession, something to look at like a painting or an ivory box. Something to own and to display. He doesn't want you to be real and to think and to live. He doesn't love you. But I love you. I want you to have your own thoughts and ideas and feelings, even when I hold you in my arms. Miss Bartlett, you wouldn't stop us this time, not if you understood. It's our last chance.
Why don't men talk like this anymore? Why is this not normal? Why is it okay that men, like, can text their feelings to you? They don't even say it. But a grand speech, a confession like that, a profession, one could say, of love like that, is a girl asking for too much when... Listen, I'm never gonna get one of these just like this. Like a beekeeper. But it truly fictitious because reality is so far from this. But oh my gosh, good job, George. Amazing stand-up gentleman. I love his confession so much. But he respects her. He tells her how he feels. She says, I do not reciprocate. Please leave. Reciprocate? And he leaves. And he's like, I'm gonna leave. Don't worry. But George, in his confession, he talks about Cecil. And he's just like, he sucks. And Lucy's like, the things he said, suspicious. And she immediately goes and sees Cecil doing something that adds up with what George says. and she breaks it off right there. Right then and there.
Freddie, as you well remarked this morning, there are some chaps who are no good for anything but books. I plead guilty to being such a chap.
Because I wouldn't play tennis with Freddie?
She realizes her eyes are open and she breaks it off. So proud of you, Lucy. Why didn't you see it before? But Lucy, she doesn't want to be talked about. She doesn't want to be gossiped about. So she's like, I have to leave. I have to run. I've got to go. I gotta gore. I gotta gore. She hears that the Allen sisters are gonna go to Greece and she's like, I'm going. Buy that ticket. Bing, bing, bing. I'm there. But she's like planning to go to Greece. But then it's also noticed that the Emersons are moving out of their apartment. And it's like, what's going on? And that's because Mr. Emerson, his arithmetic, his, what is it called? His rheumatism has come back and he needs to leave. So they're moving. Charlotte is like, oh, I'm going to go call upon Mr. Beebe. And she goes into the house and sees Mr. Emerson there instead. And he's like, we're going to talk about George and Lucy. And she gets cornered and she's stuck there talking to him. And then Lucy is sent to go fetch Charlotte. And she gets there and she gets like bait and switched into talking to Mr. Emerson. And the whole time Mr. Emerson is just like, I'm so sorry for my boy. I taught him that he needs to love and he needs to just chase love in his life and he'll be okay. And she's like, well, it doesn't matter. And he's like, I know you're engaged. And then they keep talking and she reveals that she's not engaged, but she's going to Greece. And he's like, you broke off your engagement because you love George. And she's like, no, I don't. And he's like, you love him. I know you do. Finally, she's like, I do love him, but I'm going to Greece, so it doesn't even matter. And he's like, no, it does matter.
They trust me.
Why should they? When you deceived everyone, including yourself.
Yeah, he convinces her that she loves George. And the last scene of the movie is George and Lucy back in Florence, back at the same inn, and they are sitting in the room with the view, and Lucy has written Charlotte a letter about their travels, and everybody is happy. Is this movie good? It's pretty good. It's fine. It's not the best movie, but it's pretty good. The acting is really good. The performances. Things that confuse me. I don't understand why George is like on the spectrum. He has some odd behaviors. Whoa, what's wrong with your boy? He's just odd. He's real odd. I think he is developmentally disabled or challenged in some capacity in this film, which is an interesting choice, and I'll get to that later. Now it is time to learn about the second part of my journey, the novel. Come with me.
Hello?
Now we are talking about the novel. The novel was written in 1908, and it was written by E.M. Forster, who, if you're like, that sounds familiar, well, yes, he wrote Howard's End as well. When I first filmed this video, I had read parts of the novel to like do this thing where I was just like, I either really like this part or it's a good comparison to the movie, but I think that you should read it yourself, and I don't think me reading the book actually did it any justice. I think it's a really fun book. It's like 300 pages. I finished it in like 5 hours. It's just really cute, and it's really funny and silly, and it's romantic, and I just think it's really fun, and it's easy, so you should read it. Obviously, the book is different from the film, and I don't want to talk about like all the differences because I think you should just read the book. But we will talk about some of the big things that I think make really good sense, and the context makes what happens in the movie mean more, or it signifies more, or it's stuff that maybe I think the movie got wrong. First of all, I want to talk about class. We're going to talk about society. So the Honeychurch family has a really interesting history because Mr. Honeychurch is dead. He was a solicitor. He bought their house. and he was intending to sell it, but he was like, it's nice, we're keeping it. So he kept it, and then the neighborhood and the surrounding area became more populated by more high society types, and they were just buying up the homes in that area, and they saw the Honeychurches had been there already, and so they were like, oh, they're like a remnant of the local like nobility or whatever. And so they accepted them into their circles without realizing that they weren't actually that, and they weren't actually on the same level as them. But by the time they figured that out, they're like, we like them, so we're not going to ditch them. So the Honeychurches are in a weird position of not actually being part of the high society, but being accepted by it anyway. So they're just kind of in limbo. And it gets interesting because Cecil is high society. So they do bring it up in the film too. But in the novel, his mom is very much like, you're bringing her to London and we are going to like introduce her to our circles. And we're basically going to try to make it so she's cut off from who she used to be, and now she's different and she's part of our circle now. And Cecil is like 100% trying to do that the whole time, just like uprooting her and stuff. Mrs. Weiss, even at one point, says, it's so good for her that she has you and you're helping her get rid of the Honeychurch stench. And it's like, oh, classism. But yeah, he's trying to make her fit into his circles, and he's also trying to push her into being what he wants her to be, and his image of what a woman and what a wife is. How like a man. If only they had the Barbie movie at that time. I actually like the Barbie movie. Speaking of dead parents, Mrs. Emerson has also D-worded. She's gone. It's the same in the film, but they don't talk about it in the film. They only talk about it in the book. In the book, Mr. Eager, who is the vicar who lives in Florence, he knows the Emersons, and he, like, hates Mr. Emerson. So Lucy is like, yo, what's up with you and Mr. Emerson? And he's like, well, he's a murderer. He killed his wife in the sight of God. And she's like, okay. And she learns that at the beginning of the book. And it doesn't get answered till the very end of the book. And I'm just like, that was just floating out there the whole time, that she's always kind of like, he could potentially be a murderer, but I don't know about that. Because she likes him a lot, and he and her get along really well. So she's just kind of hanging on to this piece of little thing that Mr. Eager said about him being a murderer. But basically, the Emersons are social outcasts in a lot of ways. They're low class. But also, in the novel, they reveal that they're socialists. And they're also non-religious. 3 things that will get you immediately kicked out of the posh circles. We find out that Mrs. Emerson, she D-words soon after George is born, and she made Mr. Emerson vow that they would never baptize their son. And so Mr. Eager obviously put 2 and 2 together and said, she died because you'd never baptized George. An act of punishment from above. We need to address something important. Warning, alert. Everybody, is George the Riddler? What does the lore say? He kind of is. There's a line in the book, and it's like they swap rooms, and Charlotte finds a note of interrogation and is just kind of like, okay. So, can confirm George is the Riddler. Yes. Never beating the Riddler allegations. More on George. He's not autistic. I don't know what the movie was doing. I don't know what book they were reading. I don't know what they interpreted. But as I was reading it, I didn't get that vibe. I didn't read anything that made me think that. And I wanted to see the general consensus on what people think is up with George. So I found this. I'm going to read it to you because this is what I found. George is perhaps the most modern character in the novel. His depression and abstract, lofty concerns with whether the universe fits or not foreshadow the kind of overly self-conscious characters of high modernist fiction. So, I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound like autism to me. Basically, in the novel, it says that he doesn't fully understand, again, the universe thing. It doesn't fit to him. But then his dad also quotes a poem about how we live and then we die. And he's like, it makes sense to me, but George is still confused about it. Like, I think his perception of life is just kind of confused. And then that thing I read also saying that he has depression, that makes sense to me as well. Depression and autism are not on the same spectrum, so I wasn't talking about that kind of spectrum. Something I didn't bother to say when I was talking about the movie is Cecil is really bad. I know I mentioned like things he's done that were shady, but he's like really bad. As bad as he is in the film, the novel Cecil is so awful. He's just really manipulative and he's really sexist, very anti-women. A big part of George's confession, it's the same in the film, but like a big part of his confession in the novel is so much of it is like, yo, Cecil's like this, and this, and he sucks, and you deserve better. And then immediately followed with, I would never do that to you because I love you. George tells her that Cecil will never respect her opinions and he views her as like a piece of art. It's something to be appreciated and viewed, but only that far. And he's like, he will never know how to love you as a woman and he'll never listen to your opinions because you're a woman. But me, on the other hand, I want to hear your opinions. And that's because I love you. In the film, the tone is way more diluted. Like, it's still there. But in the novel, it's so clear that this is, like, an attack on sexism. And just, like, Cecil's trying to put her in a box. She doesn't like it, but she also has nothing to say about it. And then George comes in and is like, he can't love you. Look at him. Look at what he's doing to you. And she's like, huh, interesting. And no matter how much I was like, wow, that movie and the confession, thank you, George, the novel, it's so much better. Like, George was spitting bars. Bars. Get him! Get his ass, George! Like, George, he's one of the good ones. No one's talking about George. George, guys, you would have loved the Barbie movie. Oh, there is no man to make great declarations of love to me. Not like this. More differences from the book and the film. Mr. Beebe is gay. Happy Pride! I love how politely it is described in the novel. Like, it's so abstract. It's like, he's never going to get married, and he likes women, but something about them, he just can't, he will never be with a woman. And it's like, okay, I see what you're putting down. I see it. Like, say no more. I got it. Thank you. In the movie, I saw none of this. I honestly thought Mr. Beebe was in love with Lucy. Like, there were several things he did at multiple scenes and moments where I was just like, he's into Lucy. He wishes that she was not engaged to Cecil because he's into Lucy. I don't know if, like, they were intending to go with that, if that was supposed to be there, if I just was so clueless I didn't see anything at all. But him being gay in the film is not even there. Like, it's not even something I would think about. Also, Cecil is gay. Happy Pride! You think I want him to be gay? I didn't write this. But I think it's really funny. I stole this from the book. But Mr. Beebe describes Cecil, and he's surprised that Cecil and Lucy are engaged, and this is how he says that. He describes Cecil as a definitive bachelor and not the marrying type. That's how you can say really politely that someone is homosexual. In the novel, Charlotte and Lucy are not on speaking terms anymore. Like, they hate each other. In the movie, Charlotte has so much to do with Lucy getting back with George and stuff. She pushes Lucy into talking to Mr. Emerson, who she know will talk her into being with George. And, like, at the end, Lucy's written her letters, and Charlotte is happy for them. In the novel, to back up a little bit, Lucy and George elope because nobody supports their union. And Charlotte is definitely not one of the people who supports the union. Maybe Charlotte played a small role in her talking to Mr. Emerson and therefore talking to George again. But it's so subtle and so slight in the novel. But in the movie, it's like a big deal. Like, Charlotte's like, oh, you want him? Let's go get him for you. We got him, girls. Okay. But yeah, forbidden marriage is lore. Canon. Again, I just want people to read the novel. I think it's really fun. That's all. Now we're moving on to the best version of the story. Did you really think that this adaptation would be my favorite version of this story? As I said before, film George, he's on the spectrum. Novel George, he's like depressed is all. TV movie George is so creepy and slimy, and he's so nasty. I'm gonna show you a scene that I was like trying to crawl out of my skin. It was so gross, and I'm sorry I have to show it to you.
We're in love, aren't we?
Oh. You hardly know me.
Yes, I do. I know you better than anyone.
Don't talk nonsense. I'm not angry with you about what happened. It's just the whole thing's impossible. Anyway, we're leaving for Rome tomorrow morning, so we won't see each other again.
We will. And I'll follow you and I'll find you.
He is giving off sex offender vibes. He sucks. He's the worst. And this Lucy, okay, Lucy in the movie, she's not into it. She's kind of like, I don't know what that was. What was that just now? Book Lucy is like, I'm confused. I don't know what that was. TV movie Lucy is into it. He's the worst version of George, and this version of Lucy is into the worst version of George in the world. His confession sucks. It's awful. He's so awful. It's so gross.
Is that clear?
Yeah, it's clear, but it's nonsense. You like me. I think you love me. You may be engaged to him, but you don't love him.
How dare you presume to think you know what my feelings are?
No, I just do. You don't love Cecil Vyse. No one could. Not in that way. Maybe his mother does. I don't know. I'm not interested in him. I'm interested in you. I'm in love with you. I shouldn't have kissed you, I suppose. I wish I had more self-control. No, I don't. Actually, I didn't insult you. How could I insult you? I think you're wonderful. And besides, you kissed me back.
They tell this movie in flashbacks and flash forwards, and it's so stupid and so unnecessary, and I hate it. Every time they do it, I'm like, kill me. Mr. Emerson is a freaking Wormtail, I guess. Or Nathaniel, if you're an enchanted girly.
Hello, nice lady. You want a juicy, sweet caramel apple, maybe?
Mr. Beebe in this movie, they were like, in the book he's gay, this one he's full on gay. Let's go, people. Happy Pride. And as soon as Cecil and Lucy break up, it's like, and Cecil is gay. This is true. And everybody knows and accepts that he's gay. And it's like, since when was this normal? It's the 1900s. Pathetic little gay man. Cecil is the worst. He has no on-screen presence. He's so boring. He does nothing. He's so boring. Cecil in the film, you're like,
oh my God.
You don't want to be with that guy. He's just not it, honey. This version is just like, yeah, I wouldn't want to be with him either. He's like milquetoast, boring ass, stupid little sticky little gross guy. But you would leave him for a sex offender?
Oh my God.
Oh! The reveal of the book scene, like, it's supposed to be just Cecil, George, and Lucy when they find out that Miss Lavish wrote about them in Italy. In this one, Cecil's like reading the book to a whole crowd of people, and Lucy and George are lost in the crowd. Like, they're not next to each other, they're not near each other. If they made eye contact, I wouldn't know. It was a crowd of people. That's so stupid. It's so anticlimactic. That part is so like, oh no. But this one, it was just kind of like, there are so many people here. I gotta leave. No! You have an interesting thing to do. It's so obvious what you should do. And you make a boring version. George tries to kill himself. That's funny and stupid. What is happening? And if you think it's funny that he was trying to commit suicide, George dies in the war. What war? Why? Huh? What book were you reading? Unnecessary. So because George dies in the war, that's why they do the flashbacks and flash forwards, because Lucy goes back to their room with a view and is there alone and is mourning George and like going to places that they had memories there together. And that's so stupid. Why did they do that? Why? There's no reason for him to have been killed in war at all. It's just the worst. In every possible way, it is the worst. And I thank the Lord that this movie is like inaccessible on pretty much everything. No one can find this movie. The only reason I was able to find it, and I was so excited when I found out I could find it, is because I have Canopy, because I'm a student, and I get that as a subscription for being a student. Somebody needs to, like, this movie needs to not exist. This movie needs to be unsearchable. This movie needs to be unfindable. No one. Who made this? They ruined George. Thus concludes the journey of rooms and views. I have been thoroughly roomed and viewed out. I am so glad there are no other adaptations of this story, but if one of them could be really good, new, someone do a new version, I would enjoy that. This person would enjoy, because I know everything. If you're gonna watch the film, be warned. Nudity! So, my only memory of this movie before I rewatched it and did all this stupid crap, I only really remembered that Daddy was like, oh, we're gonna watch Room with a View because it's Natsukashi to me and Mama. And then he was like, oh, but there's nudity in this one scene, so I'm gonna censor it out. And we watched the movie, and the censoring out that he didn't work when we watched it on the TV. And so we had to skip that scene. That's all I remembered about it. And then I was like, okay, A Room with a View. Isn't there like nudity at one point? And I was like, it's probably nothing. I'll just skip it. And it gets there. Dude, that scene is so long. It's like several minutes. Skip it. It's just guys in a pond. Okay? Yeah. It's a long scene. I read the book. The importance of that scene is questionable. I think it's just kind of like showing no matter what situation and standing and where you are in society, everybody just likes to go swimming. And once you're swimming, it doesn't matter who your mama is, you know? If you want to watch the film, the 1986 film, I think that's good. Again, skip the nudity. I think the best way to read this, giving myself away, I think the best way to consume this story is the novel. I think it's a smashing novel. Smashing. It's really good. It's really fun. Again, plug in it. I hope this video was entertaining. It took a lot for me to put these costumes back on and film again. This time it was a lot better, but I will say the last time I filmed, I was kind of insane. So maybe that would have been funnier in a different way. Because I was mostly laughing at myself. I don't think there's anything else.
Is that true?